All right. Lanz Pierce, welcome to the Heart Dealer podcast.
Thanks
Thank you
for
for being
having me.
here.
I'm excited.
I was really loving our chat just now about artists that we fell in love with. I was pumped for our chat simply because your publicist did a great job of sharing your story. And oh my God, there is so much to the story. I had to know everything, but I also want to go to the beginning before we go forwards. And from what the overlords at Wikipedia said was that you discovered music at a very young age, and it was because your parents divorced, and you're from New York. And go.
I discovered music at a very young age just because I think that that was just where my frequency was. Product of kind of broken home. I don't think it's so unusual. That's half of America, half of the world. Certainly the bed rock of the angst and of searching for, strong father figure, perhaps that at that moment in time wasn't there, that I got through the voices of hip hop. That was a part of it. My grandfather made records in the 40s and it was a prisoner of war. My mom likes to tell me that in utero, she used to play, no joke, marching band music and put headphones around her belly so that I would swim to marching band music, which is funny because if you think about it, it's actually very rhythmic. So it makes sense. No, but fast forward. Yeah, I was a kid who dropped out of school in the ninth grade for what I believe would be the biggest music career in the world. I wanted to be the female Eminem. Perhaps that sounds cheesy and corny now, but tell a 14-year-old kid who wants to throw her middle finger up to the system and, and go and have this passion and hunger to like be her own person. So I started in the underground open mic scene. That doesn't exist anymore, but in New York City, it was really the most fantastic, amazing, beautiful cultural explosion, where you would go and line up and go to underground hip hop clubs, and you would perform. You would have your track, your CD, your CD, and you would have your track, and it really gave you an understanding of who you are as an artist outside of what you thought you were in your head. Like you had to perform, the crowd was ruthless. If you were good, you were beloved. If you weren't, it was like a training camp. And so I did that. And somehow, by the graces of the universe, I made some noise. And there was like a specific time where I was at a show that I performed at, and the producer of So Seductive, which was a Tony Yayo record at the time on G Unit, his name was Punch. He was managed by Nile Rodgers and Michael Austin, the famous Mo Austin, Michael Austin family. And he brought me to them, and kind of the rest is history, because Nile Rodgers became my executive producer and helped me work with Aftermath Focus, who was Bernard Edwards' son. Bernard Edwards was in Chic with Nile. He, famously passed away. His son Focus was signed by Dr. Dre. And we made a song called Grow Up, which Jimmy Iovine ended up hearing, and then I got signed to Interscope.
You covered a lot of what I want to cover, but like in detail, not in surface, because I know that you've shared your story a million times before and people can just find it online or in your press release or bio. What's it like being 14 and dropping out of school? I mean, at 14, I don't even think I had the wherewithal to figure out what I was going to wear that day, let alone choose to leave school. That's a
Yeah.
big deal.
I look back at that now and sometimes feel like it wasn't my life. If I'm being really honest, because I just think it's so crazy. I mean, it really is wild. I was very convincing in my ability to, get both the school, because there's a legal element to it, and my mom, and it was like a thing. You had to get the state to say yes, and I'd scored pretty high on some testing and basically got a partial scholarship to John Hopkins, and they were like, hey, well, I guess that's pretty good. And so I was acting out really like badly in school, and there was clearly just a mixed match. Public schools, I just think in general, for kids that are perhaps more creative and arts driven, if you don't have the money to go into those schools, the public schools you're stuck with are often not the right education. So I did have the guts, but I think it's less guts, and it was more just, lack of life context and just complete irreverence. I was just like, I'm doing this. Um, Yeah, and it was basically like, yo, you have a year to get a record deal or do something with this. Otherwise, you're going to go back to school and you'll be, I was already young for the grade. So it was like, you'll be right on point. And within that year, I would say it was like I was signed at 16. So like between 14 and 16 is maybe a bit over a year but I made it happen.
Which is incredibly impressive. I mean, it's already impressive that you had that ability to make that decision for yourself at 14 or make that happen, but everything that ensued after was pretty unreal. I mean, I watched a few podcast episodes or clips with you, and you're extremely well spoken. You're very self-aware. Your language is phenomenal. Where do you get, if you dropped out at 14, where do you get your education?
Thank you, by the way. Great, great. I really appreciate that. I just knew that you had to be self-taught because so everybody in life understands that they have certain things that are working for them or working against them, or at least I'd hope that most people think like that. And so I understood that perhaps the one thing I really had was, and that's also why I was a lyricist, was my words, right? Like language, even as a kid when I was trying to get my way out of school, was how I realized I could communicate and get to where I needed to go. It was language. So I just like really self-educated. I love to read. There was nobody was doing audiobooks. I just like love to read. I was fascinated by biographies, um, poetry. I watched a lot of like clips of leaders. I was like obsessed with leadership. And I'm also just fascinated by a lot of things outside of music. Like I'm like super into space and like black holes and science, and I'm into spirituality and I'm into history. And so I don't know, I just like for me, I just felt like, I had to just it was on me to continue to feed that.
Yeah. Do you think that that version of you, or this real version of you, not that the previous version wasn't real, uh hopefully you know what I'm trying to say. Do you think that you come from um the parents having separated, and or who they are individually, or is a lot of this just what you were forced into and then learning as you go? Is it a mixture of all of it?
I think the latter is true. It's a mixture of all of it. My parents are very intelligent people for sure, and so they always encouraged me. My mom would say, learn something new every day. That was said to me since and ingrained in me since I was probably like 4. Um, and I think, when you sit down at dinner tables, it wasn't mine because I didn't have any brothers or sisters, but my larger cousin kind of family, and they were all successful as far as like intellectual and academics. Like my cousin on my dad's side was a professor at, well, he's a college professor now, but he went to Yale and, whatever. They have this kind of, thing. And so I didn't want to be the dumbest one at the table. So I think, I also loved like culture and lifestyle. I was just like, if I'm being honest with you, I probably looked at them and I was like, oh, like you guys aren't cool. And the cool for me was always important. I don't know if that makes sense how I'm saying it, but like the swag and the cool piece for me was never trying. It was like that's always naturally where I gravitated. But then I'd be in those worlds in nightclubs with lots of drinking and exposures and life. And it's just like it was fun. It was dope, but like there was a threshold of what I could talk about. So I think the key was always like the combination of all the things you said, but it was always like trying to have different friend groups and different influences and never be like, I'm only one thing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And you can have, like, they're not all mutually exclusive. You can have the party lifestyle and the clubs and the artistry, but also the intellect. You can have it all. It just comes down to personal choices that we make. Before we hit record, we were talking about Shakur and Cobain, and I remember a point in my life where I was so envious of how sharp and creative and able they were at such a young age. I'm 10 years older than you, roughly. And then it was only over the last few years, even though I had a true identity and I had like a very strong sense of self, it was only over the last few years that I think that I started to love myself and was happy with who I am. And then realized, oh, it just happens to us at different times, kind of when we're ready for it. And some people are just more ready younger, or it happens younger, and it has nothing to do with them being bigger or better, etc. It sounds like things A happened for you younger, and B that you, again, according to a couple of those episodes I watched, you are happy with yourself.
I'm definitely proud of a lot of what I've accomplished, and I also greatly feel this hunger that drives me to a point of, like, no return, of that I still have so much to do. And so, I agree that some things, they happened really early for me, but I still feel that the best of what I want to accomplish is ahead of me, and that in the being comfortable with myself, I'm comfortable enough to say that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we got, a good overview of kind of who you are and where you come from. Let's talk about your music before we go into industry, and then the Luminary Agency, which is also super fascinating. So music, you said already some of the things I was going to talk about. 18, you're kind of discovered by Jimmy Iovine, who a lot of people know about now thanks to the documentary
Yeah.
that was on Netflix. Then you go on tour with Snoop Dogg. You play at like all kinds of big festivals and stuff. And then eventually you walk away from the majors, or from the industry, so to speak. How was that experience at such a young age, being around, these big names, and being signed? A lot of people would lose their mind or waste the opportunity. How did you manage to keep things together?
Was never I'm being honest, I was never impressed by celebrity or that, because I just know how much it takes to get to the point of being there. So I think I more so looked at these people that I was surrounded by, like my label mates, for instance. I was signed by the same guy who signed Gwen Stefani and MIA and the Killers, and I was on the label of Eminem and 50 and Dre, and so I just think I more so looked at them like the the mark that I was trying to hit. I wasn't like trying to be around them. I was trying to be like them, or be them, my own version. But it's also amazing. Listen, like, I have so many incredible stories. I have, back in the day when 50 used to have his Mike Tyson house, there was like different events, being able to go to one of them as an Interscope artist, not as a bystander. That's an incredible milestone. Being on tour with Snoop Dogg and being backstage with Battle Cat and Too Short and Corrupt, which, by the way, Corrupt and I have the same birthday. I mean, amazing. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's so great. I mean, pictures, I have pictures still to this day with me and Niall and Blondie, or walking into parties. And it was like, I went to Niall's charity, We Are Family, the foundation he has, and he introduced me to Elton John. And I was just like, it's just like, so, but you can't geek out because you're not being introduced as a fan. You're being introduced as your own brand and entity. And so, yeah.
At what point, if at all, did you realize in doing all that stuff that whether it was 50 or someone else, they're just the same as me, and so there is no reason to necessarily
Yeah.
geek out?
I knew, it's funny. I knew Gaga before Gaga was Gaga. We actually, if you Google Lanz and Lady Gaga BMI Writers on the Rise, you'll see a photo of the two of us as kids. And, just understanding how massive she is. And I applaud her, but I won't share, because I'll honor those times and those conversations. But there were plenty of conversations early on that remind me of the conversations I've had, which is, are they going to get me? Do they think I'm enough? Do I have the look? So I guess I just always knew that, because I've seen the grind. I've seen the come up of so many artists that have hit it big.
Yeah. I mean, the grind is one of the hardest parts. I mean, I'm doing it, you're doing it. There's a lot of people that do it, but in the grand scope of the world population, there are very few that grind. We've talked a bit about your personality, obviously, uh, but how do you stay motivated? How do you keep going? When you have those days where life is beating you down, you're like, oh, again, another loss. What is the Lon's
I just don't
method?
think I have a choice. I don't know what the choice is. Like, really though, what is the choice? I mean, there's nobody that's going to like support me or coddle me or make it happen for me. So there's just do or die. I mean, it really is that, you know? So um I don't know, I just keep going because I have to and because I believe in being a winner.
So no plan B for you. It's this or
Yeah,
nothing.
and that this keeps changing. So I think that that's where there is breathing room, right? That this isn't just I am a rapper or a singer or a music artist. I am also a songwriter. I'm also a creative director. I also direct films and music videos. Well, we're going to talk about other things in the next part of this, but I also run a business that allows me to be creative through storytelling. So I think like the this or nothing, the this is the bar is success. The bar is, am I going to be true to myself and make something meaningful and be able to look back at it and say, well, I did a good fuck. Oh, so I don't know. Can I curse on here? Okay. All right. I
Of
did a good
course.
fucking job. Yeah.
Can you imagine if I said no? How lame would
I
that
don't
be?
know. I've done plenty of interviews where they're like, no, you can't.
Yeah, I'm all about just do, just be. If you're not your authentic self, then no
Well, we're
good.
in my living room. We're in my house. So we're pretty authentic. And I have no makeup because I didn't know we were
Man,
going to be on video. So for your listeners and your viewers, like it or love it or whatever, but this is as authentic as it gets.
natural is the way to go. You are naturally beautiful, so you don't
Thank
have to
you.
worry
Very
about
nice.
it. I mean, I have a hat on. I can go bald for you, and then we both have
Okay,
something going against us.
okay.
Um, authentic self, like I don't know about you because everyone's different. I have days, even though I'm my biggest fan, I'm my biggest champion. I have no plan B. I agree with you. You have to be smart enough to pivot, right? Because if something's not working out, then you ask yourself, why? Is there something else I could be doing? But there are still days where I need support. I need someone to say, yo, dude, you got this. It might be my girlfriend, it might be a business partner, it might be anything. Do you have a support system
Yeah,
in place?
I
Is it
do.
mom?
Yeah, it is. It is. I have a support system in place. I have really great collaborators. You know, I do believe in the power of meditation and prayer. I do believe sometimes the best way is like also get off topic. There's this thought
Yeah.
leader that I love. She goes by Abraham Hicks. It's funny, but she goes by Abraham Hicks.
Mhm.
And it's just like manifestation principles and tools. And there's like Joe Dispenza and there's a few others. But I really like Hicks because what she says is she's like, hey, when something is resistance, like, and you're like, you know, banging your head against the wall on something. She's like, get off the topic and go do something you love, right?
Yep.
Because the only way to make anything good in life happen is through joy. So if you're not enjoying it or you're not feeling joyful or positive about it, you are only going to like truly bring and magnetize to you negativity. Like the universe, I believe, doesn't know what you want or even unfortunately right from wrong. It just knows where the dominant energy is. And so
Yes. I
yeah, no, just that's it. That's it.
go
And
ahead.
so like my support system is a combination because for me it's not enough just to be coddled. Again, back to that like only child autonomy thing. It's also like I have to get to baseline of feeling good.
Yeah, I'm with you. Um, I'm finishing a book right now called oh my God, The Surrender Experiment. And it's fascinating because I too believe in manifestation and universal energy, the connectedness of all, so to speak. It doesn't mean that you can't sit on the couch and say, I want $1 million and expect it to rain on you. You have to grind to get there. But the principle that this guy talks about is that the universe knows best and that we in life make decisions based on right or wrong, good or bad, preference, what we like or don't like. And if you remove that altogether and start to look at what the universe is showing you, that paths become maybe a little easier. It's kind of the same idea as avoiding whatever the block is. So if you're like, oh my God, I can't get this chord right, and I can't get like put the guitar down for a second and close your eyes and see if there's something else that's popping up in the room or in your world. Is like that's that piano. I keep thinking about that piano, but I keep
Right.
avoiding it. Maybe I should just pivot, and go to that first. And then before you know it, that flow can come back, or whatever you're supposed to do will transpire. Maybe you were supposed to write that next song on the piano, not the guitar. And then like you were going to talk about later, like the path all of a sudden changes drastically, and all of a sudden you have Luminary Agency versus
Yeah.
rapping.
Yeah, no, I completely
But
agree. And flow
before we
state, it's flow state, right? It's like in flow state, you're not thinking or trying, you just are, and you're in flow state.
100%, want to talk about the industry and obviously your agency, but before we do, at what point does one take on too much, so to speak, or maybe spread too thin? I'm not saying you are. You have so much on the go. How do you
Yeah.
handle it all? How do you
I mean, you're
balance?
so right. What's the saying? Jack of all trades, master of none. I mean, I wouldn't, I'm not giving myself that moniker, but that is a real thing that one thinks about. Um, well, first of all, I do believe in team, and I have a really great team. You talked about my publicist. I also have a great team in Luminary. I have great musical collaborators. I write everything, I perform everything, but I do not produce. So when I want to, I guess I could say I top line produce though, because like I'll sit with I guess the point is I don't want to because I like the fact that it's not all on me. I want to sit with the guy who made Get It is a guy named Cale Hawkins. I want to sit with Cale who plays every instrument and is a genius. And I want to say, let's listen to these 5 songs. Let's listen to like Marabou State and Midas and then a J. Cole song and then like something that, Drake did on the album that was all about the UK, and then let's listen to a UK rapper. Like all these weird influences, and why do I love them? And I'm going to share them with you. Help me figure out why I love them. And that's what a great producer does. He's like, "Oh yeah, like yeah, maybe you like the flow in this, but also maybe you like the patterns and so like collaboration and making sure you don't take on too much go hand in hand, right? If you have fantastic people to do things with, delegate. On a business side, it's called delegate. On a creative side, it's called collaborate. But I think those two make sense.
Like that, delegate and or collaborate. That's synonymous. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. So I mean, this is kind of a given, but the more help we get, the more we can take on, right? So the bigger the team, the larger the pool of things we can
Totally.
accomplish.
Totally. I think that's true. I think it's also the quality because it's not always quantity. It's not always the bigger. Sometimes but like I think you just need a few really right people in your corner, and it's super important also to make sure that they feel invested too. Because You know, I think as artists, sometimes we forget there's this like narcissistic thing about you ever go to dinner with an artist and all they talk about is themselves? I mean, yeah,
Yes.
it's not what I want to be, And so I think it's really important to empower people to listen, to remember that you can learn magic from a mouse or a monster. I don't know. I have all those things that I kind of live by.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just artists that are like that. There are plenty of people out there that are narcissistic and don't want to learn. We have a mutual love for Tupac, and I know that I've probably said this a million times before, but even a genius asks questions. Never be too smart, too old, too whatever to learn. Because if you are, you're missing the point.
Hundo P.
So you're in your late teens, early 20s, and you leave the major system and then you go independent. And what I love to do, because I run an artist development agency and we have book publishing and we're working with so many, like, I don't want to just say up and coming because it's so cliche now, but like just artists who have never released something before, or maybe who have but want to try a different approach. I love getting information for them from people like yourself that have been through so many different trials or versions of that. Why did you leave? And then we'll talk about like the independent side, like how
Yeah.
you did it.
I don't I didn't leave because I really wanted to. If I'm being completely honest and transparent, what happens when you're a new artist on a major label is you are very much so a small fish in a very large pond. I also wasn't dropped. So it's a kind of a weird thing because there's clauses and things in contracts where if you're kind of just idle, you have the ability, there are things that are built in for artists to protect them. And I had the best attorney at the time. Shout out to Michael Guido, who was also Jay-Z's attorney and Bono's attorney. But essentially, without getting too granular, I left because I was idle. And I was idle because the label was trying to figure out what to do with me, which is not so dissimilar than
Yeah.
other stories of artists when you're so different. You got to remember, it was a time, it was before Nicki Minaj. It was before Gaga really broke. It was before a lot of these female artists that were kind of paving the way. And at that time, if you were a rapper, you had to go through a camp. That was what it was. It was like Eve through Rough Riders, right? It was, you know, all the Foxy through, the big, and Kim through the big kind of engine, right? I didn't have anybody standing
Yeah.
behind me. So I was in a major label, and it was time for me to figure out how to get that noise that I wanted. And so I ended up I ended up leaving out of what I thought at the time was the only way to get to the next place and to be heard. And so that was its own challenges, that was its own challenges. I very much so at that time could have gone right to another label. I could have gone. I was the it kid. There was so much buzz around me. I didn't, because I thought of what I had learned from, some of the guys who had gone and bought their own masters or who had gotten funding. And the idea that a label, when you learn the business, essentially dictates what you can put out and when you can put it out, right? So let's say you get signed and you get $100,000. Half of that goes to taxes. The other parts of it go to your managers and your agents. You're like left with this much money. Now, you have to look fresh and flashy and all this stuff, but you can't actually earn money because you're not allowed to put anything out unless the label approves it. And to the label, you're an asset, you're an investment. So they're not going to put out anything until they feel like their engine is ready. So I was in a holding pattern. That's where I was going with this long-winded answer. And when I went independent, I went there because I was like, well, what does the other side of the coin look like when you're not beholden? And the pros are you're not beholden. The cons are you really need to find the right platform, attention, energy, and capital to fund it.
Absolutely. And that actually is a perfect segue into you going independent. So I think that your independent releases, from what I could see, date back to about 2013. And then, you've got a whole bunch of stuff on your profile up until today. And I think Get It came out in May. That's your most recent single. How, you obviously were, to use your words, the it girl. So it might have been a little bit more easy to secure some funding and go independent. But if you weren't, how would you tell an artist that is aspiring to even get funding? I mean, is that even possible in
Yeah, I
2025?
do. I think it is. Socials are a huge component. People have leveraged that way more than I have. And I applaud those guys because that in itself is a business. People who are spending nowadays, artists don't have to just be artists. They don't just have to be music makers and brilliant songwriters. They have to be video editors. They have to know the social algorithm. They have to, so you have to nowadays share so much more of your brand and your like personal life and every second of your being just to get the attention span of the consumer. So I would say, use what's there for you, which are those tools. And then I would say also try to align yourself and be a little bit thoughtful about what a quote investor means and what that even looks like. It's called family and friends. It doesn't actually mean it's your family or your friends, but in the investor terminology, family and friends just mean go within your immediate network and basically do a campaign, so to speak, of starting to try to raise capital. So that could be, going to a friend who knows some big business guy who has some liquidity and ask. You don't know unless you ask. And then there's the traditional route, which is venture, but harder to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think most artists now are scared to spend money on themselves, and that's the thing that I'm trying to instill in them, is that if you're not willing to invest in yourself, whether that be like through your own savings or getting, a job, maybe Uber, I don't know, and you put that cash back into your project, how can you expect other people to want to invest in
Yeah, and
you?
listen, it's hard. It's like, it's soul sucking when you have to work jobs that, you don't want to work to do what you love. And then when you do what you love, there's really no acknowledgement for a while, if any. And then you also look at music as a commodity that's there's huge piracy to it. Spotify pays 0.001 of a penny per minute. And I know that because I worked with a company that combated Spotify called Tune FM. It's a Web3 streaming platform. We changed the monetization for artists. So I know that. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's not easy. It's period. I mean, the motivating thing needs to be you love it so much and you have such a special voice and use the channels of socials to get out there, find your fan base, because the most immediate acknowledgement that you could ever need and want is the fans. And the best thing is about when I was doing it via Interscope, you needed to go on a major tour to get there. Now you don't.
Yeah.
So I actually think the game, somebody said to me the other day, I thought this was the most powerful thing. They said a 17-year-old Lanz today on tour with Snoop Dogg would be the biggest artist in the world. And we watched my performance at the VMAs. There's a performance. It was if you Google Lanz, I didn't go by Lanz Pierce, I was just Lanz. If you Google Lanz, 3-6 Mafia, Las Vegas, Interscope, you're gonna see this performance. I did a song called Swerve, which was my single at the time with Juicy J, 3-6 Mafia, Paul, and all that. And there's not one phone in the audience. Like there's no phone with the videoing. So think about that. Think about the fact that information, like
Yeah.
the label was like, "Oh, Lons, we're gonna send a camera crew." There was one like you see in the audience, like thousands of people. You see the old school cameras taking photos. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the technology has advanced so tremendously, and it plays a part in so many different areas of the industry. Do you think that because of how much things have changed, I mean, from your perspective, having been in this for 20 years or so now, um, do you think that it's more critical now more than ever to be authentic, whereas before you could get away with more of a persona?
I think the opposite is true. I think
Interesting.
the opposite is true. I think nowadays there's filters, there's AI, there's, every and any tool you want to look better, to sound better. Um, I can post just the clips that I want to post and I have control over because it's my channel. It's not going through the press that's posting it. It's my channel. So there's so much more ownership for artists. Whereas in the times of, 2007 to 2000 15 of like my major label kind of time period when I was just a teenager, and a young person who was figuring it all out, my image wasn't just my own. And there was, there was very little, there was much less tools for ownership and autonomy to control it.
Yeah. How hard is it to, or easy, to release music independently now? I mean, you obviously have had the experience of both before and after, and major and independent, but you've also had some backing and you've had distribution deals with, I believe,
Yeah,
Empire and
I still do.
Foundation,
I still do.
um,
Yeah.
which is amazing. Most artists don't have these blessings. They're like, okay, I'm gonna go on DistroKid and figure things out. Like, are there certain do's and don'ts or rules that you follow or that would follow or suggest
Yeah.
following?
It's about continuously getting to the next level. So be happy with understanding that even if you're at the level right now that feels like the starter, if you do that level correctly, I promise that there is another level. And the best thing is when you get to the next level and you have the chops to do it and that nobody can really deny you because you've met the threshold, the mandate, the whatever of being at that next level. So do each level fully and then don't settle and keep going. If you are on DistroKid and you're getting thousands of plays and you have a great social following, do your research, go find distribution platforms, submit your stuff. people wanna find that's the thing is people want to find the next money-making artist, but they also wanna find the next seminal icon, like, people want that.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you. It's same as I mean, life and I guess the world of entrepreneurship is you just keep going. You trust your gut, you trust your intuition. You fail fast, you fail hard, and then you keep going. Life is very much like a video game. You know, everyone wants to finish and complete, but man, it takes a long time to get there. You know, and you might feel like there's a million roads ahead. That's because there are.
Yeah, there are. Well, listen, you never get it done and it's never finished until you're no longer like here on this planet, right? So if you know
Yeah,
that there's always another kind of moment to refine and do it better, you actually embrace the fact that like it's okay because we're all growing and learning, you know?
yeah. I mean, being independent comes with its a lot of its own perks. A lot of artists that you and I probably either grew up on or are very well aware of said in one way or another to try to be independent. I mean, Prince wouldn't work with anyone that didn't own their own masters, right? Like, I think it was Nas. Was it Nas or Jay Z? One of them was talking about how Prince was like, "Hey, I want to collaborate with you," and then he said, "Yeah, you don't own your mixers or masters. Like, I'm out."
Fun fact that's not
Um,
in any bio or any piece of anything online. So exclusively telling you here is Prince's sister, her name is
yeah,
Sharon. Um, she managed me for a little bit. Yeah.
that's awesome. You've I feel like we need like a day long podcast just to get into all the
Yeah.
details and stories. Maybe we'll do it in person in
Down,
New
I'm down.
York. Um, Aesthetic and the brand, the image, that's something that you can control as an independent artist, and that'll obviously lead nicely into the agency that you have. What is the brand and aesthetic that you're going for, or that you're trying to create for yourself? The only thing that I'll say is that I really loved how on your Spotify profile, and this I guess is for any DSP. I'm not a Spotify diehard. Um, almost everything was black and white. There was a very cool vibe to the music. Talk to me about what it's like having control over your aesthetic and where you're going with it.
Spot on. I love the French noir, aka the black and white aesthetic, because I think it just makes everything feel um nostalgic and classic, which to me makes you automatically ask yourself because like the idea of nostalgia is that something feels like you've known it or it's familiar or there's something there, so it's like I want my music to take people into their own journeys and I want them to feel like it's theirs. I also love color. If you looked at any of my music videos, I try to use color as a foreshadowing tool. I'm a big fan of like Quentin Tarantino, the Kill Bill color foreshadowing, or the Hype Williams belly using color for emotions. I love I'm also a director. So it's like I also look at things through the eye of I had a project I put out called Editor's Eye, and it was all about the ability to like direct your life. So I love where my image is now because I think more than ever it's just like all natural, like fresh face. I think natural. I try to like lean into some of the like high fashion stuff that I've gotten exposed to in my European travels. So um like having smart, sleek fashion without it being Gucci and Prada, where it's like name brands. No, it's more about cuts and like cool and like I like mixing like the androgynous, the like masculinity and femininity together. I'm really into being physically fit and working out. So I try to, without it being over sexualized, I think that you can actually, and I think women in music have always like gone that route where it's like over sexualized. Whereas like I think about it like the David in the sense of we look at the David in the museums and we're like, oh, his body is sculpted. It's like art, you know? So it's like I kind of think about wanting the imagery and playing with, themes of sexuality or natural versus like the high fashion gloss as like a juxtaposition that they kind of should like come up against each other and be this hybrid.
That's awesome. That was such a good clip right there. I love your throwback to David because I think that, I mean, we as a society have become so hypersexualized through, porn,
Yeah.
whatever it is, and there's been this huge loss of romantic with the capital R. Like, you should be able to look at a beautiful naked body and not sit there and start fiending out about it. Not to say that that's not a good thing as well, but that's not the
100%.
only
It's
thing.
art. I mean,
Uh,
yeah,
yeah.
you're
So
100% right. Like, I really wish also, I think, we do live in a man's world. I believe in the power of women, and the power of men and women together it's the ultimate beauty. But I think that there needs to be less toxic masculinity. And I think what you just said is such a powerful, positive, but strong like perception. So A, I applaud you, and B, I wish that there was more of that amongst men and male driven audiences that are talked about. Like, I think Scott Galloway does a really I'm a big fan of him. I don't know if you listen to Pivot or not, but I think like those are like really good platforms for people to hear about.
think it's going back to the old school. I mean, another quote from our friend is, "Ain't nothing like the old school," right? I was raised by very strong Eastern Europeans, both male and female. My grandmother and mother were both hardworking people, as much so as my grandfather or grandparents and my father. And there was never this battle about things because it was about the love
The
and
unity.
the, to use your work, teamwork, the unity, exactly. And so there were
Yeah.
gender roles, and that's okay. And it's okay to also not have gender roles. It's about the ebb and flow. And I the woman I'm with now, she's such an incredible mother, and she takes care of our kids and our house and our family, and she feeds me. She doesn't work, but I do, and I'm in a point in my life where I need that type of friendship, or not friendship, sorry, partnership, to be able to grind the way that I do. And if I didn't have that, it wouldn't work as well. My ex-wife, who's incredible, she's like me. She's a grinder, and she is doing so much in her world. But because we're both grinders, then there was always a battle about who was going to have time to grind versus the family. And so it didn't work in my
Okay.
situation. That also doesn't mean that there's a right or wrong and that you can just fit everyone into a box. It has to be
100%. I
circumstantial.
completely agree. I also think it's really nice that like when you come home that the business piece gets shut down, right? And somebody is your sunshine and somebody
Yes.
is your light. And so I yeah, I get it.
It's funny because, full circle to the beginning of the conversation, I think a lot of that is simply about knowing yourself, loving yourself, and then also like knowing how to love someone else unconditionally. And that took me a long time to learn how to love myself unconditionally and also love someone else unconditionally, which is really just about appreciating, respecting, and loving what they love. If you don't have to be the biggest fan of it, but if it's the most important thing to them, then it should be
Mm,
important to
I
you.
like that. I have a saying that I try to say as much as possible, especially when things trigger me. I go, I hold space for that. I hold space for that. Cause it's like I don't have to like it. I don't have to, but like I hold space for the understanding that it's there, that it exists, right? And so like that could be on, you could use that on any like frequency. That could be for something like I said that you don't like. It could also be for something that is important to somebody else that you're like, it's not my thing, but I hold space for it, you know?
Absolutely. That's like music, right? Not everyone likes every style, every genre, but you can hold space for it. My grandmother once, I mean, she used to always say, "Chacun a son goût" in French. Everyone has their taste. It doesn't mean you can't love all tastes. Some people do, some people don't. Just love the fact that everyone
Yeah,
loves something else.
totally.
Um, I want to talk and ask about everything, but I'm also, conscious of your time. You mentioned that you might have a hard stop. How are you for
Um,
time right now?
I could go like another like 5, 10 max, but yeah, I could go like another 5, 10.
Amazing. Well, why don't we just talk about Luminary then? Because it's fascinating. This empowered woman who has navigated the industry from one end to the other, who's also done music videos and short films and produced and worked with Nile Rodgers and who knows what else. Somehow you decide to also start
Yeah.
a company.
Yeah.
Why?
The I always thought about when I was with, and in the rooms with the business leaders of any of the industries that you've mentioned that I've been involved with. I always like looked at them like, wow, you guys hold all the power. And I was always just like, oh, must be so nice, to be able to have that knowledge and also make those decisions. And so I just was really fascinated by business in general. I think I wanted to have the ability to educate myself and be knowledgeable about how systems work. I think systems are fascinating. Like there's a system behind everything. So I started Luminary because I also felt like there was a lot of adjacent pain points between founders, like startup founders, and music artists. They both get proof of concept capital. They get signed to a record label, proof of concept capital. That is the recoupable amount of money. You are a startup founder of a tech company. You get a VC to put money in. Not only you as the founder and the VC have to return LP dollars, right? You now have to find product market fit. So all of these things were so interesting to me. And I was like, oh, like I'm really driven by that. And so when I worked with a lot of the music video directing and campaign directing, I did something for Sephora. I did something for a startup founder of a lingerie brand who had been a former model, and she raised 2.5 million to create more size diversity and inclusivity. And I had all these people had these like missions. They were all mission aligned, purposeful. And I was like, my music was about mission aligned and purposeful stuff. And I basically was like, I'm fascinated by how things scale and grow. And so I built Luminary to be a brand incubator, to be the intersection between content, communication, and capital. And I've had some wins. I had a company that I early on played a role in. It was music tech driven that Jack Dorsey years later ended up purchasing. It was my first exit. Um,
Nice.
I, got to be involved with a company that I was mentioning before called Tune FM, which is also on the music side, as a streaming platform for Web3 and blockchain that we ended up bringing Snoop Dogg on. And Snoop Dogg ended up becoming the voice to get Spotify to respond to his claims that he made $45,000 after 1 billion streams. So basically, I loved what Luminary did. It put me in a position where I was still very much so involved with the most exciting, cool stuff. I was storytelling. It wasn't just me in front of the camera being picked apart by, you're not this, you're not that. And I was working with the smartest, coolest people. So it's like, just felt right, you know? Um, so yeah.
Yeah. Was it born at all out of a, desire for your own story? Like you mentioned how you kept pivoting, or we as artists and people need to pivot as we grow. Did you get to a point where you said, "Oh, what's my story? How do I tell this?" And then from there you conceptualize a
It's a
company?
good narrative. It's not my narrative, but it's a good one. No.
Fair, fair. I'm just asking questions. Your brand has a story. We'll
Yeah.
help you tell it. I am a huge believer in the story, and that's one of the things that we do with all of our artists, whether they're an author or a musician or even some of the businesses we worked with in the past. We try so hard to, through interview, through conversation, understand who they are, extrapolate that story organically, and then turn that into the narrative, so to speak. How do you get the authentic
I
story?
listen first and foremost because I think that every founder, every artist does deep down know what and who they really want to be. They need fine tuning, they need support, they need confidence, they need resources. But first I listen. Um, then I think about, maybe that is my creative piece, maybe that I can get a little pat on my shoulder, maybe that is my genius, but my ability then to like synthesize that and have ideas that I can put my own ideas and marry them together is kind of how we start. We start at the ideation phase. I think about what works, looking at data. So it's data driven, it's inspiration driven, and it's collaboration.
I love that. I'll wrap up because I don't want to keep you from whatever it is you have going on. When I talk to people, people know me as Gonda. I'm a big believer in love. I have choose love tattooed on my arm. I got that from my grandmother as well. And I am about love and logic. I think that informs the big picture for me and for life. What is your thing? What do people know you
What
for?
a good question. I think people know me for Love also. I actually believe that I do operate with that. And the other would be like I was always known to be like a little bit of like a little sage, meaning somehow I always like want to share some wisdom. So, I'm the friend that you come to that will be supportive. And then instead of just listening and being like, "Oh, it's going to be okay." I'll probably serve you up whether you want to hear it or not, a little dose of Lan's wisdom. So hopefully that's a good thing.
That is, I love that. Thank you so much for your time, Lons. It was such a pleasure
Such a
chatting with you.
pleasure. Really, really awesome questions. By the way, they get me thinking about my own self. So thank you for that. And I hope we chat again soon.